Overseas Territories. Oh, we've just started recording. I'm going to start the introduction again. Hello, everybody. My name is Reem Ibrahim, and I am the Friends of the British Overseas Territories events coordinator. Thank you so much for joining us today for this evening's webinar, or the morning, depending on where you are in the world. I am so delighted to be joined by two very, very wonderful people. We've got the FOTBOT president, the Honourable Charlene Cartwright Robinson, who was the Premier for Bermuda, and we also have for Turks and Caicos, and we've also got the wonderful Honourable Michael Dunkley, who was the Premier for Bermuda. So without further ado, we're going to talk a little bit about what it's like to serve as a Premier, the kind of special relationship that the British Overseas Territories have with the UK and being in the UK family, as well as the kind of sort of careers that they had, what it was actually like to serve as Premier, but also just in terms of the current relationship that they have with the Overseas Territories as well. We're also going to hear a little bit about the specific sort of cultural heritage and a little bit more about the domestic situation. So without further ado, I am a gentlewoman, so we're going to go with ladies first. I would like to introduce Charlene.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm happy to be here with you this afternoon. It's very hot and sunny where I am, so we're a little concerned. You would appreciate that, Michael. Hurricane season, we're in the middle of it, so it's kind of worrisome for us here, but beautiful weather still. Turks and Caicos Islands is one of the remaining overseas territories, as you can appreciate. I served as the leader of the opposition first in 2012 to 2016, and then as Premier 2016 to 2021. So I've seen the coin flip on the type of relationship that I would have had with the UK government. I perhaps was the most engaged government with the UK in recent times, and that's because of the challenges that I would have faced. So I'll talk a little bit about that. But the Turks and Caicos has had its constitution since 1976. We've had a resident governor. We have had a ministerial system of government since 1976. We've had the constitution revised, amended, but largely two major revisions following two unfortunate experiences where our chief minister's premier in 2009 were arrested. And there was a commission of inquiry, and on both occasions, the UK suspended the Turks and Caicos constitution, allowed for an interim administration, and then returned elected government under some major change to the electoral system. Since the reinstatement, the last time, it would have been 2011, we would have lost our strongest constitution. That would have been in 2006. That really gave a lot more power to the elected government. And it's really been watered down by certain processes, but also a few words that say where the governor would have said in different parts of the Constitution, where the Constitution would have said, acting on the advice of the government, we now have where the governor doesn't have to consult the cabinet or can bypass the cabinet by going to any Secretary of State. So we now in the middle of constitutional talks again. This is the third government that's trying it. Mine was the second. We at least got some responses then. And we're now currently in the middle of constitutional talks. I find that a number of the proposed amendments are still cosmetic. I think we appreciate in our recent experience that we may not get all that we want, especially from the 2006 Constitution, but there's certainly room for the UK to improve on its relationship with us by, at least acknowledging and rewarding the way that the country has been run since the Michael Mizik administration and all of the allegations that came along with it, because we have come a very long way. There are processes and procedures in place, and it's been really difficult. Some of the process, we'll talk a little bit about that, but nonetheless, we've done well, I think, in terms of good governance. The governor under our constitution has always been responsible for internal and external security, international relations as it relates to the financial services sector, and then the head of the public service. Where the powers came for the governor is more in operational in our recent constitution. So you have a procurement process that's under the deputy governor. You have the regimen that is now in place. Of course, as much as it is paramilitary, we have absolutely no say over what we basically instituted. So it's those sort of things that we think may sound shallow, but still deep for us here. I had the pleasure of working with all of the governors since 1999, rather in my capacity as chair of my party or secretary general or leader of the opposition or premier. Fun fact, we've got our first female governor about a year now, and she's the only governor I have not met. I haven't had the opportunity to speak to her. But I bring this up because, and all of those governors who usually serve 2-3 years, is really different personalities. The governor that I dealt with at the beginning of my term was completely opposite to the one that I ended up with my last 2 years. And the Constitution then appears as if you're working based on the personality of the governor. And that's where we have a problem in Turks and Caicos. So while the governor, when I came into office, was more of a roadblock, was more bent on following the public service who were already timid by the Commission of Inquiry and allegations and all these systems that threatened them. The governor that came after was definitely more of a partner and would say, you know, tell us how it can work. Tell us what we need to do to make it work. You know, so he was definitely more of a partner than a roadblock, if I can put it that way. So Turks and Caicos is now in a situation where you're hoping that you get a governor with a good personality, and no country should have to be governed in that way. The constitutional changes, I said already, are on the way. So we could talk a little bit about that probably in questions because it's kind of diverse. But my challenges certainly made me more have to engage the UK government more. 7 months after I was elected, we had Category 5 hurricanes, Irma and Maria. So I began my term with 2 hurricanes, and I ended with the pandemic my entire last year plus. So of course, the UK did step up. The UK did assist in providing not just aid, but also manpower. The military and other bodies came over, especially following the hurricanes, and definitely during the pandemic, you know, assisting with the vaccines and all of the other work that we needed to have done. But in the middle of that, I had the greatest challenges in the areas that touched on the remit or the constitutional powers of the governor. Saw an increase in sloops breaching our borders from neighboring Haiti. We certainly saw an increase in murders that's happening around the region, but record murders, and of course that is the responsibility of the governor. And then of course we had the whole challenge of opening our registers for public registers for a country that is, you know, focused on financial services. So I certainly had to engage the UK more, and I found in my engagement, there are times you had to be firm, very, very firm, because there was and still is too many persons who believe that they're going to paint the entire Turks and Caicos with a broad brush because of what was allowed to happen even under the UK's care. Because as when a lot of the allegations were being made, I was the Secretary General of my party, so I would have been one in the meeting saying something is wrong. You know, so my party has always taken the moral position that we blew the whistle. You know, we told you. So you have to be more engaging with us and not act as if we are doing something wrong. So I believe we got a lot of respect, especially with the governor. He was always basically really at our side. And if I had him for an entire term, Michael, I may have been elected again. But he definitely was a part of some major changes. And because we have this separation of powers I should say that the governor is still the president of cabinet in Turks and Caicos, which is very different from Bermuda, which is a different form of government, the self-internal government. We are not full self-internal government. We're ministerial system government. But the governor can involve the premier. They can together do the agenda for cabinet, but all of the communique and everything, all the action minutes and everything is done by the governor who signs every decision for it to be actioned. But this governor, the governor that I had, and I'm referring to the governor that I had because, again, I'm saying it's personalities right now. Together we created a national security strategy, which was a mission of my government. We were able to get the UK to support us and entering into an agreement with the Bahamas, a shipwright agreement that allow us to work together to stave off the illegal sloops that were coming to both our shores. So it took us about 3 years to get that done, but it was done. We were able to set up a regiment because, Michael, every time we had a hurricane, we would send for Bermuda Regiment. And, I said I wanted my own, and the good news is when I was asked, what would you like to see in the next governor? I said one that respected local government and one that has a background in national security because of the challenges we were having. And we got just that. So I mean, we can't always say that we'll get a governor who's friendlier to Turks and Caicos and sees himself more as a person that is a partner. So I'm hoping that we are able to get better changes in the Constitution so that we won't have to rely on the personality of the governor. I think I'll shut up there. That should give you a good overview. In terms of domestically, what is happening now? What is happening exactly now? We've had 5 tourists arrested in the last 6 months with bullets and rounds of ammunition that they said that they, all of them, mistakenly left in their bags. So as a matter of fact, right now we have representation from the United States at the Senate level and someone from the White House, I believe, so who met with the governor. And so Turks and Caicos is a little on edge right now. And what the governor does is really going to set a fire ablaze, or she's going to earn her respect, because we've had a lot of gang violence. And I increased the minimum sentence for gun possession and weapons. And the government came in and pretty much doubled it. It is not a mandatory 12 years, as all the media houses have really been saying in the United States. I wish they would learn the law before they do spread it, but it is what it is. But she's now entertaining these persons who've come to discuss, these 5 persons who are waiting for the court to make a decision. And so because we are in this position where we are having so much gang violence and with guns and ammunition, we're now hearing, even in social media on the platforms, let's see what the governor does. Then if she does that, she makes the wrong statement. Now, no one expects about how, nobody expects a tourist who's found to have mistakenly left bullets in their bags to spend any 12 years. But we've had a clarification from the Court of Appeal that says there has to be some sentence, custodial sentence, because of the type of environment we have now. Someone just asked that I speak to security. Turks and Caicos is experiencing what especially our neighboring Bahamas is experiencing. A few misguided young men who call themselves gangs, and we might as well be real. And what we see more than anything in Turks and Caicos is retaliatory killings. Someone is killed from this side, this one kills that one. Regrettably, last week, the police intercepted a stolen vehicle, and in exchange of fire, a 14-year-old was killed with the police. Now, before I left office, we started a joined up government where community and all of the systems that should not have missed this child to be working together more. One of the departments that I created was the Department of Rehabilitation and Community Service, who is really now focused on at risk and trying to cut off the supply of young people to gangs, right? It isn't a situation where you can't go this place and you can't go that place. Now, we do have 1 or 2 areas where there's illegal settlements, and the police themselves don't go in normal vehicles, but it's not something that is very common. It is a situation as well that we've been dealing with the UK and dealing with the number of illegal settlements. You would appreciate that the majority of our expatriates here are irregular migrants, and that has been an ongoing challenge with the British, and that they speak to human rights. But our situation is that they now have criminal territories, or you can never really budget because you don't know who's here. You know, the school space, the hospital, all social services are overrun. And then you have the child that is shot who's just totally missed by a system because he's undocumented. So those are some of the challenges that we face. Again, the number of murders have really been a tit for tat approach. But Turks and Caicos, I believe that this governor has continued a number of the initiatives that we started. So we believe that we can see a difference once there's continuity, once we continue in something to get a result. So I think that's it.
Charlene, thank you so much for that. That was really, really fascinating. I was just noting down some questions that I'll have, but I'll save them for the Q&A. That was really fascinating. I'm particularly going to be interested in hearing about you sort of said you wanted constitutional reform. I sort of want to know what that looks like, but I'll ask you that once we've also heard from the wonderful Michael. So Michael, over to you.
No, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. And like you, Charlene, yes, June 1st, it starts the hurricane season, and we always do our best to prepare in advance for it. I'm an optimistic person. I mean, we're such a small place out in the middle of the ocean. So I believe very positively we're going to be successful every year in avoiding the throes of a hurricane. But unfortunately, they happen. And like you, I was actually the premier and the minister of national security. And we had 2 Category 5 hurricanes in 1 week, which was pretty amazing. But we dealt with them in a very appropriate way. One of the good things about Bermuda is we've had an emergency measures organization for a number of years. And originally that was set up to deal with hurricanes and issues such as that. And so as soon as there's the advent of a tropical storm in our area, that organization's put together, and that is chaired by the governor and the Minister of National Security. And we bring in helping agencies in the community, but also agencies within government that would have to deal with it during the hurricane, such as the Weather Service, the Bermuda Police Service, the Bermuda Regiment, Works and Engineering, all those departments. So we plan on what's going to take place, and we action the way we're going to communicate and going to deal with it. And I think we've been quite successful in dealing with those hurricanes when they do hit us. But this year is supposed to be an active year, so we have to pay attention. And I hope that all our friends down in the Caribbean are lucky this year. And certainly I pray that we're lucky as well. I really appreciate the feedback from former Premier Charlene on what's taking place in Turks and Caicos. You know, one of the first things that, actually, I think it was the first trip that I did when I was the Premier. I went down to Turks and Caicos for one of the pre-joint ministerial conferences down on her lovely island there. And I remember as soon as I got a feel for what was going place in some of the meetings with all the other chief ministers of premiers of overseas territories, I was quite surprised to see the very different constitutions that we all worked under for various reasons. And Bermuda's been blessed to have, I guess, the most advanced constitution of any one of the overseas territories. The governor actually is responsible for our foreign affairs, but we've always had the ability to communicate with the governor, handle them ourselves, and obviously, overseas security. As far as local security is concerned, the governor, the police commissioner answers to the governor, but the government funds the Bermuda Police Service, And we've always had a very strong seat at the table when we talk about big issues facing Bermuda. And one of those would be obviously, like most of the countries in this region, we have the issues of gangs and guns. And one of the things that I'm quite comforted by during my tenure as Premier Minister of National Security is we managed to take a great deal of bite out of the gangs and the guns usage here in the island. But it's a type of thing that once your attention is diverted somewhere else, or once there's a softness in the activity, that's when you have to be the most careful, because things continue to work underneath the surface and jump up and bite you from there. And so the challenge is still there in our community, because we have those who are copying the culture in other jurisdictions, who get involved in the dealing of drugs, or just have petty grievances to solve, and they want to have various regions of your country which they can try to control. So you can never let it slip. But even saying that, I think Bermuda, like many of the overseas territories, are some of the safest places in the world, because by law, you're not allowed to have a gun. And thus the penalties are very serious if you do have any of those offenses. And Charlie, and I've been following what's taking place down in your country, and I sympathize with the challenges that you have to face with all the overseas media attention, because people supposedly travel and didn't know your rules. But for the grace of God, that could happen in Bermuda or anywhere else. And it is really difficult when you have to face those type of challenges. As I said, our relationship with the UK is very devolved, and my time, actually, I just retired from politics effective March 31st of this year, after 27 years involved in politics, in opposition, leader of the opposition. Then we were the government. I was a premier and deputy premier for a period of time. I always had good relationships with governors, probably dating back when I first got involved in the periphery of politics back in the late 80s and early 90s. And Charlene hit the nail on the head. The governors tend to change every 3 years, and every person's going to have a different character and a different way they dealt with them. And what I always tried to do is first build a relationship, and secondly, find out how they like to operate, so I could make sure that any issues that we had or I had, that I could move them forward. And so when I was the leader of the opposition, and certainly the premier, it was very important that we had good relationships. The premier of the day runs the cabinet here. The governor is obviously aware of all the legislation that's going to go to cabinet, and aware of what takes place in parliament, and then has to sign off on that legislation, as well as the leader of the Senate, before it's passed. And so I typically had regular meetings with the governor to tell him what was intended, to get his views on it or her views on it. And we actually have a female governor at this time as well, so we can move them forward. I'm not in favor of many changes to our Constitution at this time, for the simple reason is I believe the world is a much more complicated place than it has been over periods of time. And I think Charlene will know very well when I speak to this, I speak to regions now who never had their eye on Turks and Caicos or Bermuda or any overseas territories, but now they want to get into our pocket with our business. And so the regulations, the compliance, the oversight is much more cumbersome than it ever used to be. And I think as long as you have a strong relationship with the UK, you can ensure that you can deal with some of these challenges in a much more effective way. Bermuda is blessed to sit very close to the United States, and we have a strong relationship with there. And we've always tried to do things in the best way we can. We've had a register of public interest now for almost 50 years. And so when there's talk in recent years, probably starting up as much as 15 years ago, that every territory or every country should have a register, obviously other than the big countries, because they wouldn't impose it to themselves. We hit back, well, we've had a public register. It's not available to everyone to see, but law enforcement agents can look at it. And the UK, before we make any changes, you have your register, and then we can talk about any changes we want to have. And then the conversation changed at that time, because other countries, certainly with the power and authority, they were somewhat reticent to take on that approach. But we've always tried to be open and straight with people. We don't want people laundering money here. Our business has certainly grown because of the reputation we have, and that's why we currently are one of the leading reinsurance jurisdictions in the world, other with the UK and New York. So, our relationship is critical that we have a strong compliance center here in Bermuda, and I think the Bermuda Monetary Authority is excellent at that. We build strong relationships with the United Kingdom and the United States. And in my time, certainly in government and as a leader of the opposition, I always wanted to stay tight to my overseas territory friends, because I think there was a lot of power in us talking together, lobbying together to deal with not only our challenges, but other territories' challenges. And so we could move forward in unison as much as possible. Certainly, in my time in politics, I've seen it become much more complicated. I've seen people, the people who vote for us, I would say that I think they're more frustrated now than they've ever been about politics, because the pace of change seems to be slow in trying to get things done. And we've seen the advent in the last 15 years of social media, which has played a critical role in the formation of opinion and the spreading of information. So, a politician today has to be able to work in a very different way than a politician 15 or 20 years ago. And certainly, I take great pride in the work I did, certainly as premier of the country, because I enjoyed the role. The biggest miss I have from politics is helping people and working for people. And I got great satisfaction when I retired, because even the government members now, because we sit in the opposition, there were 18 of them in Parliament that day, and 14 of them spoke and thanked me in very kind words for the work I did. So it just went to show that my approach in politics, I was always going to be firm, but I was going to be fair. So I wouldn't be overly political to the other party, because I think if you get overly political, we've seen what's happened in our world today. Politics has become more polarized than ever before. So I tried to be firm but fair so we can get issues done. Because I didn't ever like to see those issues sit on the table and make no progress. And I think we've made some great progress. In my time as a premier, we built a new airport, which is lauded by everyone who comes through it. We had some great hotel development with the St. Regis and the Lauren. And we hosted the America's Cup in 2017, which was a boon to our economy and put us on parts of the world map that we never were on before. We was televised to 180 countries around the world. So, we were very comfortable and confident in the work that we did. But as former Premier Cartwright will agree, is that the work you do yesterday and the work you're doing today is great. But tomorrow there'll be new chores that you have to do, and the people aren't satisfied until they know that you're working for them every day. And so, that's just a little bit of overview of what I see and what's happening and our relationship. And I guess the last thing I will sign off before I turn it back to you, Chairs, is that I think politics is going to continue to be more complicated than it was before, because you have to communicate so much more than you had before. Everyone's got a voice now because of instantaneous communication with social media platforms, and people are very critical of where we stand at the present time, because after COVID and people getting their wings again, we've seen that the cost of living certainly in island destinations has gone through the roof. And it's very, very difficult to deal with cost of living issues on small islands where everything has to be imported. So to be a politician, you have to have very thick skin, you have to be humble, and you have to be able to work 7 days a week to take care of the people that you were elected to serve. So back to you, Madam Chair.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, Michael. That was really, really fascinating. Thank you, both of you. I mean, I think just particularly on what Michael was just saying about imports, I mean, if you are dealing with a cost of living crisis and there is a lack of supply of a particular product, it means that you've got to import more of that product, otherwise prices just won't come down. And I think it's really interesting just from an economic perspective. The economics of islands are so different to larger nations in which those products can be produced domestically. And so I think that's really interesting. So we will now turn to the question portion of this very awesome webinar. I've got loads of questions that have come in. So I'm going to start off with one that was mine and also my colleague Oliver Wilderspin's. So this is for Charlene. You spoke about the difficult relationship with the governors and also the way in which the premiers themselves have sort of been able to develop the constitutional relationship. So what sort of constitutional reforms do you actually want to see, sort of specifically?
It's, as I said to you before, it was more operational. And there are some challenges that we faced immediately after the last suspension that we need to change. So we need to address. For example, the trial by jury was something that was in our, as a human right. We lost that, and it becomes a process now as to whether you can have a constitutional right to be select a jury of your peers. That's something we want to see return. The management of Crown land, for example, you can appreciate on a small island that is an important issue. There was a system in place. It was changed under the Michael Mizik administration. We asked for it to go back, and the UK has put land, the management of Crown land, under the Attorney General. And the people of this country believe that is in fact insulting because it's a process and a procedure anyway. Again, we have the fact that the UK government can appoint persons to the governor can appoint persons to our House of Assembly. The premier gets one, the leader of the opposition gets one, but the governor gets two. And that came in the 2011 Constitution. And the people of the country, when we did the talks again around the country, goes like, listen, if we can't get them to take one, get rid of their two, just scrap it all together, because it was a difficult situation. When I was leader of the opposition, the government won by 1 seat. I had 7 seats, the premier had 8, and we had 2 governors appointed members who can swing the votes every time. And though I was in the opposition, it was painful to watch the government have to lobby with 2 persons who were nominated like that. Additionally, we look at we have a country where we have persons who are born mainly outside of the territory. So you have you have persons who have dual nationality. Let me put it that way for you. I'm one that had to renounce a citizenship where I was just born there, but I grew up here. And so one of the changes we want to see is to be in control of that. So if a person has dual nationality and they didn't select to become a citizen of another country after the age of 18, then we want to be able to make it clear that they don't have to renounce, because we do have more people born outside Turks and Caicos, and the persons who are having kids here are the persons who are in transition, the transitory persons or the undocumented Haitian nationals. We also have one of the major issues is consensus and the removal of the deputy governor and the attorney general as full members in cabinet. The attorney general, of course, is the advisor, and the deputy governor has the public service portfolio, which is delegated to that person by the governor. But under the 2011 Constitution, they became full members. And whilst we don't have voting in cabinet, we've had experiences where the full government was in agreement. The elected government was in agreement, and we had the AG who had a different feeling, or the deputy governor who had a different feeling, who we believe should be just ex officio members, not allowing an elected government decision to go through cabinet. So those are the kind of things that really, rubs the wrong way here in Turks and Caicos. So those are some of the top changes. And final thing that I think to pull out, well, we have cosmetic changes like Parliament instead of House of Assembly and those sort of things. But I'm talking about the ones that actually run deep. So we have a situation with the Boundaries Commission. The Boundaries Commission, because we're in an election year now, always was one for the premier, one appointed by the premier, one appointed by the leader of the opposition, one the chair appointed by the governor. The 2011 Constitution gives the governor all 3 appointments. One by the governor's chair, The second is the chair, the second is a person of high judicial office, which used to be one. And the premier and the leader of the opposition are expected to share one person. So when I was leader of the opposition, and even when I was premier, we just never supported it. So we never had it. Now we have them basically force an appointment through. And it's really insulting because at the end of the day, any report that comes from the Boundaries Commission goes to the House where it's governed by the numbers anyway. But those are the kind of little things that run deep just because we find them insulting. There's no reason to hold on to 3 appointments when at the end of the day, the elected government is going to have its way in the House. So just an overview.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. Thank you, Charlene. I think it's interesting just from a sort of thinking about the kind of specific reforms that would actually change the constitution that would then have that immediate impact, but also just actually make it fair. I mean,
to jump in here, talking about the Boundaries Commission. So in Bermuda, we're split right down the middle. Government House has 2, the opposition have 2, and the government has 2. So yeah, to me, that's one of those issues that should be resolved quite quickly because, boundaries issues are issues for the local government of the day, the people who are representing those who elect you. And I'm surprised that that's not an easy issue for Turks and Caicos to resolve. And I would have thought that a governor would look kindly on that.
So just let me come back. We've literally been fighting them the last 2 months, and now they've just gone ahead and appointed how they wish.
That's crazy.
To us, it's a non-issue. It's just a matter of showing that you respect.
Yeah.
At least, it's a matter of respect. That's what it boils down to. I'll say no more.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting is respect, and also just the fact that it's constitutionally fair, right? The fact that you're able to nominate those people, but it ultimately be representative in the democratic system. We've got a question from Shazia. So Shazia, would you like to unmute yourself?
Thank you. My name is Shazia Andim. I'm from East London, and thank you so much for inviting me in this meeting. My first question is to Charlene, and the second question is to Michael. The first question is, you have talked about your constitutional reforms and provisions. Have you incorporated any provisions which can benefit international relationship or which can benefit to the United Kingdom? Because in this time, United Kingdom is going through a critical time in terms of cost living, in terms of security challenges, in terms of conflict of interest between the political parties. So how can you make sure that there are some provisions included which can strengthen the relationship with the United Kingdom? So this question is to Charlene. My second question to Michael will be, Michael, you mentioned about the complex situation in this situation where you see that in terms of security, in terms of commerce, the system has become so much complex. So what policies would you suggest to make it easy or to make it very simple so that we can go towards the simplicity where we can reduce the cost of living? Because I personally believe it may not be supplies, reduction in the supplies. It may be wrong policies of the nations where cost of living has to be borne by the nation. So what would you suggest? Thank you.
Michael, do you want me to go first then to my question?
Yes, go ahead.
I don't know that we can build that in the Constitution, strengthening. Again, it is a matter of whether no, I shouldn't say that. No, we probably can't. But at the end of the day, it is, as long as the UK has taken, and we've done it before, a partnership approach, and the provisions of the Constitution follow that, the relationship has always been stronger. It's always been stronger. When you go into cabinet and, okay, I'll give you something how it works. With the national security and the threats that we were having, my government came into office determined to create our first national security strategy, outlining the top 10 threats and then moving towards how we address them. Of course, you can imagine, Michael, hurricanes we had as a threat, illegal migration as a threat, gun crimes as a threat. And under that document, never before, but under that document, the premier and the governor holds hands on national security issues. And I can tell you that made the relationship across the board strengthened, because people feel when you have someone that says you're no longer the parent or the child, a parent or child relationship, it's a partnership, but I'm the partner, you're not, right?
Like a sovereignty, isn't it?
Right. It really affects, you got more of a loggerhead approach, because you're always pulling and tugging, right? And even if they mean well, you're suspicious because it's not documented and it's based on what you say rather than what you're willing to put in writing and in action. So for me, the only way it can be strengthened is by putting fairer provisions and by showing it more of a partnership as opposed to really a parent and a bad child.
Okay, in terms of the second question about the cost of living, it was interesting. One of the things I wrote down before we even started the question period was, just reflecting on COVID. And this, my general observation that, unfortunately, I believe that in too many cases that once we came out of COVID, people forgot how to work. They forgot how to solve problems generally. And we made more excuses about what had to be done. And I say that because I put on my political hat, I put on my business hat, and I found that, through COVID, in a lot of cases, supply lines worked better than they worked after we came out of COVID. And, so solving a cost of living problem is a very difficult proposition, because you have, as a small constituency, a small place like Bermuda or Turks and Caicos, you don't have a lot of levers that you can pull, but many decisions that you make impact the cost of living. So, for example, one of the things that I've been against for some time, and I declare my interest, I'm in the food business, but I was always against the implementation of a sugar tax. So the government of Bermuda implemented a sugar tax a few years ago, and the duty rate on items that have a small amount of sugar is 75%. Now, that is a significant amount of duty paid on those items, which drove up the price of a lot of items that many people purchase on a regular basis. And we haven't changed people's eating habits up to this point. So that increased the cost of living. I find that bureaucracy has increased the cost of living significantly. And the cost of doing business has also increased the cost of living. We tend to make more things so much more complicated in today's world that all of these things add on to the cost of living. And one of the things that we haven't found the pendulum swing back yet in regards to COVID and the cost of living is the price of shipping. The price of shipping went up astronomically. Everything imported to Bermuda, like Turks and Caicos, comes on a ship. And we found container rates were just going up in significant levels, and we haven't seen those rates retreat yet. And so that it's critical that we take a look at those and we understand, well, if the rates could go up so much during COVID, why do they have to stay this high? And I'll tell you, our friends in the UK, that, when a shipping container comes into Bermuda, that 99.9% of those containers, when they leave Bermuda, leave empty, because we have relatively little to export. So you're paying a two-way voyage for a container that can be filled with goods for you. And so I think what the Bermuda government needs to do is they need to get out of the way and let business do what they do best, because capitalism cannot work unless governments get out of the way. Governments can't put more controls on them, more taxes on them, and government has to run more efficiently to keep the government budget at a certain level, because in small communities, you can't just keep raising taxes. And so, coming out of COVID, a lot of things were put on the back burner because you had a couple of years where you weren't doing your normal business. So your infrastructure has struggled, and you got to get on top of all of that type of stuff. Governments need to get back to the basics. They need to free up to allow businesses to do what they have to have the competition that you need. And I think that you can get on top of the cost of living. Now, one of the drivers of cost of living that we never talk about until it hits home to us is the high cost of healthcare. And unfortunately, that's a more difficult one to control because, you know, with all these new inventions we have and with modern medicine, whether it be prescription drugs or equipment to diagnose what you have to do, they cost money and they have to be paid for. And as you know, human beings, we're living longer than we ever lived before. So the cost of healthcare is going to be one that's very hard to control. But what needs to take place in Bermuda is, and I can't speak for other countries, but in Bermuda, we need to have more oversight of what takes place because right now, in many areas of medical professions, you can do what you want to do, and that's driving up the cost because doctors can have a doctor's office, they can prescribe you, they can have the equipment to send you for the test, they can do blood tests, they can do all of that type of thing, and you can get that done anywhere in the island. And the more that you have of those facilities, the more they're used and the more you drive up your healthcare costs. So we've got to be very aggressive in these areas to make sure that we can have a very fine-tuned community that works well and we can control our cost of living. Because if we don't, we're going to start to see brain drain from our small countries because they'll go to other places where they believe the opportunity is better.
Michael, it's absolutely fascinating and I think really interesting just in terms of the way in which the domestic economy works, right? I mean, you spoke about the potential of a brain drain. I think what's interesting is the imposition of higher taxes and this idea that the economy isn't going to be one in which it is open to business, open to economic growth, and indeed that is allowing itself to import goods that they aren't able to produce domestically, ultimately to reduce prices. You need to have a higher supply, and so you need to be importing these goods and you need to be ensuring that businesses are able to thrive and allowing the incentives to do so. I think it's really interesting that you think that a lot of that is down to that kind of government intervention that harms business and harms entrepreneurship. I think that's interesting in itself. I'm going to now turn to our CEO, Philip Smith, who has a question.
Thank you very much, and thank you both, Charlene and Michael, so far for your answers. So I have just two questions, if I may. Firstly, I would just be interesting to hear both your thoughts about the upcoming UK general election and and from Turks and Caicos and Bermuda. If you're both probably aware, it's looking like it's going to be a big victory for the Labour Party. Do you see, or have you heard of any potential changes in the relationship, or do you expect there to be? And also just a specific question to yourself, Michael, just to congratulate you on your very long career in politics, because I believe you recently stood down from
27 years.
Yeah, 27 years, and I think you were elected just 2 years after the Bermuda referendum on independence. Was it 97?
That's correct. Yeah.
So I just wanted to, I hope, hopefully not too difficult question, Michael, but I was just wanted to ask what you felt your biggest achievement was during your career, and also your biggest regret during the 20. Yeah. So that's. But yeah, firstly, just to ask both your thoughts, perhaps coming to yourself first, Charlene, on the what changes you might see with a UK Labour government at the end of this year.
Thank you very much. Just give me 20 seconds, because on the question that Michael responded to in terms of cost of living, Michael, you're 100% correct in terms of bureaucracy and the small population and shipping. But for Turks and Caicos, one of the largest drivers for high cost of living is our cost of electricity, right? That runs through
us everything. As well.
And that is just difficult to deal with. You know, after the hurricanes, the electricity company says, we need an increase in the rate. We declined it. They have under the law the ability to go for a commission of inquiry, which they did. The governor declined it first. That's the process. And now they should have been back at the table in 2020 to reduce the rate. They're at the table now asking for more, because the more hotels we build, the more people we import, they say we have to purchase equipment. So, you know, it's like always running away from you. UK elections. I don't know if the civil service themselves are expecting a major change, but they're trying to rush through everything. And they're saying, you need to get this done, you need to get this done, or you may lose the constitutional changes. But my husband and I are probably one of the few people in the Caribbean region that wake up every morning on Wednesday and listen to the Prime Minister's questions. We are fascinated, because we can't get away with a quarter of that behavior and not even an eighth of that behavior. in our parliament. But we did follow the local government elections, and it does appear even from here that there could be a change. But I felt that way several prime ministers ago. When you had so many prime ministers in such quick succession, I thought the people would have been more leaning towards Labour. What does that mean for us? We found that the Conservative government has always really been about, I should say, family. They like having overseas territories.
Mhm.
I find that that party, I've seen both of them in action, but that party is really about keeping you together like a family. And I found the Conservatives are more willing to work with you. I haven't been around the Labour that long, but definitely I can say that when I see both governments at work, from the positions that I held, certainly the Conservatives are big on the British family and overseas territories. So they seem to be doing a little bit more to try and keep you there. Not that we're going to go anywhere, Michael, because we always use Bermuda. One or two people every couple of years talks about independence. You go like, look, forget that. We're too small, you know? But that's my
Yeah.
thoughts.
We have the same thing. This current government wants to be independent, but the people of Bermuda, I would say, 75 to 80% against it. But you know, the UK elections, I always, as a key figure in local politics, I've stayed away from saying too much about other people's elections. But it seems clear that there's going to be a turning of the tide in the UK, but we'll have to see. And I don't think there's going to be a major change with the overseas territories because, let's face it, any government change is not because of how they've handled the overseas territories. It's how they're handling their own economy. And so, you know, we'll have to see, and you know, we'll be like the rest of the OTs. We'll build the relationships that we have, and our main person that we deal with, the governor, will still be here for a short period of time anyway, because I think ours is coming up to the end of the 3 years. So, you know, we'll have to take it from there. You know, you hit the nail on the head, Charlene. Is electricity for smaller communities is a big issue. And one of the things that we do here, and I don't know how your utility companies are handled, but there's a big tax on the importation of fuel. And I think with the cost of living so high, government needs to take a look at a reduction in that cost of living with that cost of duty on fuel, because I think you can put money back into people's pockets, which is critically important at this point in time, because our cost of living is high and it's not going to wane in any way. So the specific questions asked to me, you know, 27 years, yeah, I miss it because I threw everything into it. And, you know, it was a very difficult decision that I wrestled with for some time. I could still, you know, serve. I'm 66. I feel in real good shape. You know, I built up the strong relationships, but I remember when Senator Mitch McConnell talked about stepping down as in his position as leader at that time. He said that Father Time is undefeated, and that really sunk into me, because even though, as I said, I feel pretty good for my age and I'm very active, and I started to think, you know, I've dedicated a lot of my time to public life. I live, you know, very busy life, even outside of that, with politics, business, and the other things I do. I'm blessed to have 2 children and 3 grandchildren right now, and I've been away from my family, as the former premier can talk about. You've been away from your family for longer periods of time. You know, my wife hasn't had Friday nights, because that's typically when we meet in the House of Assembly for all of those years. And I thought, you know, while I really enjoy service and I feel I have a lot more to give, and a lot of people wanted me to stay, the difficult decision, the right decision, was to retire because I need to spend more time with my family and help raise my grandchildren, who are entering a very difficult world. And one of the things that I've always prided myself in is that I'm going to try to put a stamp on my children to give them every opportunity to live a good life and be successful. And with that stamp, it's, you know, how you conduct yourself, the way you work, the way you live, your character and your integrity. And I'm not perfect by any means, but now with 3 small grandchildren, I'm blessed to have 2 of them live close to me, and one of them is not too far away, even though in the States. When I come home at night, when I drive by the 2 grandchildren's house, their mother and father's house, my car stops automatically. Whether I make it stop or not, that car stops, because I've got to go see those 2 grandchildren at night and in the morning before I go to work. And so hopefully I'm blessed to continue on with that. But I've told colleagues in my political party and also in the current government that, if you don't pay attention and if you don't continue to try to do the best for Bermuda, I'm still young enough to come out of retirement, because the country needs help, and politics is not going to get any easier anywhere in the world. And, Charlene, I think you might agree with me. We're finding it more difficult in Bermuda to get good people involved because of the pressures of the job and the public focus and the spotlight on them, which can be negative at times. And so, I'm going to try to mentor more young people to get involved, and that's what I've tried to do in my constituency. So my achievements, I think I've highlighted those. Obviously, I think even people who didn't support me politically will say that I listened to and I was not afraid to work with anybody. I'm a people person, but biggest achievement is we turned the country around. We were in a very difficult position in 2012. We built an airport without encumbering any more debt. We put tourism back on the map, and we certainly put Bermuda back on the map. I wish I had some more time, but in our system, when you're the leader of the party and your party doesn't win the number of seats, you might sit on the bench, but you're on the other side of the house, and the party with the majority takes over from that time. So I served a number of years after that, and certainly was quite successful in opposition, holding government's feet to the fire. And my biggest regret, I've been asked that question a number of times, and I go back to one of my popular songs, Regrets. I've had a few, but I don't mention them because things that you do in life that you might question afterwards, whether it was the right decision, you use that experience. And so I don't have regrets per se. I have decisions that in hindsight, we probably could have done a different way. But those are learning opportunities, those are learning experiences, and you just live and learn from that. That's what life's about. Life's a circle. So if you live and learn, you're going to be a better person, and your country would be better for it. So back to you, Chair.
That's wonderful and incredibly honourable that you want to spend more time with your family, I think, but you're still ready to get back out there if you feel as though it's needed. And I think that's really interesting. Let's quickly go to Alison, and then we've got one more question, and then we'll wrap things up.
Hi there. I have a question for Michael. It's just about during your time as Premier, one of the things that you advocated was pathway to status for residents in Bermuda, so mainly mixed status families, children born in Bermuda, or long-term residents. This is something that's obviously ongoing. It's been going on for decades. Do you think in the foreseeable future there's going to be some kind of solution to this, or is this going to just take maybe another several decades for these kinds of people who, maybe some of them have been there for 30, 40 years, they can't vote. Some of them say they're treated like second-class citizens. What do you think the outcome of this will be eventually?
Unfortunately, I think it's going to go on for some time, because although the current government, when they took power in 2017, they rallied against pathways to status when we were the government, and it was all around the right to vote. But when they became the government, they've had a number of different immigration ministers in the 7 years since then, and they've always talked about immigration reform, but we've seen very little progress. And I just don't think that it's going to be something we're going to see any change in the next couple of years, because they've created a real concern about some people on that right to vote. But in the meantime, I think we're losing good people because they believe that they just don't, they put down, they contribute to our economy. They've started to build a lifestyle here and family and friends and everything, but they just don't have a future. And it tears at me, because I understand the arguments on all sides of the equation, but I also fully understand when you have these important decisions to make, that even the right decision is very difficult, and there's going to be some pushback. And if Bermuda is going to be successful moving forward, we have to find a way to work through this matter, because 7 years we haven't been in power, and we still haven't seen it go anywhere yet. And I don't see anything on the near horizon to see any change in the next 3 years. And the country is going to lose because of that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you for the question.
That's fascinating. And last question to the both of you. Do you think that, this sort of comes off the back of what Michael was saying earlier about the premiers and indeed Charlene as well, Do you think that the UK could do a better job in the type of people that it chooses as governor? I mean, there's sometimes a probably harsh impression that they are sort of unimpressive diplomats at the end of their career.
No,
Should it be seen as a more senior position for better quality
I'm
diplomats? Or do you think governors be civil servants from other parts of the UK government with more experience of domestic affairs?
well, let me jump in here and answer this question. But my youngest grandson just came back from school, and he always likes to see his pop when he comes in. So here he is. My youngest
Oh, it's
grandson just came back from
adorable.
school. He
Oh, you're
is
not
something
doing me
else.
any favors for my baby fever.
Well, but this is what it's all about. This is the future. This is why we have to put time to him. So thank you for letting young Blake here be involved. And before he
Oh.
catches his tongue, I'm going to turn it back over to my lovely wife.
Hi,
Charlene, I'll let you answer that
Lovely.
question.
We've had so many diverse backgrounds in terms of governors. As much as I've been involved from the party level for over 20 years before I rose to the office as premier, I never knew that there was an opportunity for the head of state. I don't know, maybe if it was done before, where they asked, what would you like to see in the next governor? So I don't know what that selection process was like before, but I knew it became a game at the swearing in of governors, where everybody will, from their background and the opening speech, go like, well, what kind of governor will he be? So we would be literally taking bets, not exchanging monies, but I bet you he would be this kind of person, that kind of person. But I found in comparison that those who are at the very end of their career and about to retire were not as aggressive in assisting. It was like almost a holiday, like before you retire. So you found that they weren't rocking any boats and they weren't doing anything to say shine or nothing, Now, while Nigel Dakin, the immediate past governor, was at that, he was not a career diplomat. He was one of the first. He was not a career public servant. He came through the army, through the military. And, his style of governance made a difference. And I think if they were to continue that, asking what you would like to see in the next governor and actually honoring it, it will make a difference. But because we've seen both sides, people towards the end of their retirement do well, and those just enjoy the beach.
Did you have a similar situation, Michael? Do you have the same view? Do you think that there are those kind of changes that could be made in order to improve the quality of governors?
No, the key thing is what Charlene said, is that before the change, there needs to be communication on what would be expected and what will work best. And if you do that, and that discussion has taken place in the past with Bermuda, but you got to do that and take it on board. And sometimes I think they get the decision right, and other times it's more difficult. But I'm one in life that I find that we like to complain about things too much. And so once a problem is identified to me, I don't really like to complain about it. I like to get on to it, because complaining is just wasted. It's burning daylight, as we say sometimes. So, if you got a difficult situation, you can't change it, when you better get on and work and work towards it. So, I've dealt with a number of governors, and some of them, were very easy to work with, and others were more difficult and caused me some challenges. But at the end of the day, we always had reasonable working relationships, and some took more work than others.
That's really interesting, and I think quite a positive note for moving forward with the end of the webinar. So thank you both so much for joining us today. I think it was absolutely fascinating, and if we weren't all on Zoom, I'm sure we'd all have to give you a big round of applause, or we can give you a virtual one. There we go. Thank you so much to Michael and Charlene. That was really interesting. Before I let you all go, I just want to update you all on our upcoming events. So on Wednesday the 19th of June this year at 6:30, we've got an event coming up on the history of Royal Naval rum presentation and a reception. So we're going to be joined by Chris Howe, MBE, and we're going to try some of those rums, and that should be quite an interesting and quite fun event. We've also got an event on our regular summer barbecue, which is on July the 16th. Please do come along. We've got our charity showcase as well. Very good food, as always.
And the former governor of St Helena is speaking at that event room. Just
indeed, yeah. So former governor of St Helena, and you can with the ticket that you buy, you get 2 drinks tokens and a cash bar, and of course the full barbecue as well. So very much so worth your bang for your buck. We've also got a tour of the Speaker's House on the 21st of August. And of course our Christmas gala in December. So if you haven't got your ticket for that, please do. Should be very fun and very exciting as well. So thank you all so much for joining us this evening, and I hope to see you all at our next event.
And can I just just say thank you, huge thanks, Michael, and our president Charlene, who I just wanted to put on record my personal thanks to you, Charlene, for being our charity's president for the past, I think, coming up to 3 years now, Charlene. It's been really, really good to have you in that capacity. And I do want to just mention that, Michael and Charlene, if you do find yourself or you want to come over to the UK in December, you'd be both very welcome to attend our Black Tie Gala dinner, which is on a boat this year. We've booked out HQS Wellington. Yeah, awesome. And we've got Lord West speaking, a former minister from Gordon Brown's days, actually, and he served as a commander in the Falklands campaign. But yeah, just want to say a huge thank you, and thank you to everyone who's joined this call, and wish you all a pleasant evening.
Amazing. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely evening.
Stay well, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.